Hello, everyone. My name is Zoe Bossiere. I'm a doctoral candidate at Ohio University, where I teach creative writing and composition courses.
And I'm Sarah Haak, a doctoral student at the University of Cincinnati. Like Zoe, I also teach creative writing and composition courses.
We are here today to discuss practical methods of teaching creative writing during times of crisis through student-centered pedagogies. First, we will provide an overview of the problem, including examples of the ways institutions are often too slow to respond to crisis. Then, we will introduce a series of pedagogical care strategies based on student-centered writing research. Finally, we will move into a discussion about our own experiences applying these strategies in our classrooms during the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope these insights might be of use to those looking to incorporate pedagogically appropriate care into their creative writing classroom, both during the pandemic and after.
On March 6, 2020, shortly before national lockdowns in the U.S., Dr. Jessie Mail, nonfiction writer and disability studies scholar at NYU, tweeted the following: "I've walked into classrooms after Hurricane Sandy, after violence on campus, after the 2016 election, and during the #coronavirus. Each time, students look to me for answers, to be the calm and rational one in the room. There needs to be more training and guidance on teaching in crisis." As instructors, many of us have felt the acute absence of the training and guidance Mail describes over the past 2 years, as students have carried the COVID-19 pandemic and other crises with them into our classroom communities.
Though many teachers rose to the challenge, the pandemic revealed how unprepared our institutions were to adapt to the evolving needs of students through shifting CDC guidelines, university policy, caretaking obligations, and overlapping crises, such as when Texas students faced remote learning challenges amid widespread power outages during Winter Storm Uri. While many of our institutions have attempted to respond in good faith compliance with current CDC recommendations, including on-site coronavirus testing, remote learning options, mask mandates on campus, and incentivizing students to get the vaccine, these responses only address part of the problem. Since many of our institutions don't currently offer resources for faculty to better guide students through the emotional and material sides of crisis, the onus is often placed on teachers to fill this gap. When it comes to student mental health and well-being, we as writing teachers are uniquely suited to respond in the classroom through our pedagogical practices. Whether global pandemic, natural disaster, or national reckonings with gun violence and police brutality, creative writing instructors face three primary concerns during times of crisis. First, how do we support students' emotional well-being in compliance with shifting university, departmental, and national policies? Realistically and humanely, in what ways do we adapt our syllabi and classroom practices to make appropriate space for anxiety, grief, and care? How do we responsibly facilitate conversations about the crisis that could, and perhaps should, inform our students' writing? To help answer these questions, we turn to experts on responding to and supporting students in times of crisis through trauma-informed writing pedagogies, as well as student-centered classroom practices, such as the implementation of universal design principles and, when applicable, writing workshop models created with student input.
As educators well know, undergraduate students come from all walks of life, and many come to the classroom having directly or indirectly experienced incidences of high stress, abuse, suicide, neglect, poverty, racism, and other challenges. Writing instructors are uniquely positioned to work with trauma, as students often write about and from their lives as they experience them. Because most of us do not have the mental health training to address trauma through therapeutic practices, the challenge for writing instructors is twofold. First, how to address trauma in student writing so our students can improve academically, and second, how to address trauma in students to promote a healthy and safe classroom focused on learning and writing. Trauma-informed writing pedagogy, also referred to as trauma-informed teaching, can help us with this challenge. Trauma-informed pedagogies evaluate how trauma impacts learning and behavior, acknowledging the role trauma has played in both students' and instructors' lives directly when designing curricula. To this end, writing curricula integrated with trauma-informed pedagogy should acknowledge the prevalence of trauma, seek to understand the impact of trauma on physical, emotional, and mental health, as well as on student behavior and classroom engagement, emphasize physical, psychological, and emotional safety for both instructors and students, demonstrate the 5 guiding principles of trauma-informed care: safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment, and remained mindful regarding the risk of re-traumatization. Compassion, understanding, and empathy are at the heart of practicing trauma-informed teaching in the classroom. Here are a few suggestions for writing instructors to channel empathy productively in the classroom. Recognize trauma. First and foremost, as instructors, we must learn to recognize and acknowledge trauma in the classroom. Reevaluate syllabi language. Consider replacing authoritarian language with more inviting phrasing that promotes accessibility and inclusivity. Consider shorter writing assignments. Research shows tighter constraints can have a huge impact on the disengagement that results from trauma. Reevaluate checked out students. Move from focusing on what is wrong to what is needed and possible. Engage in positive priming. Students experiencing trauma are often entrenched in negative emotions. False positivity is not recommended, but something as simple as genuinely greeting your students when they first enter the classroom can be hugely affecting and can promote a sense of connection and belonging. Be present and check in often. This is a tough one in a time like the pandemic when everyone involved experienced a feeling of disconnection and apathy and classes moved remote. But maintaining ongoing communication can convey a sense of mutually beneficial stability and safety. Additionally, focusing on maintaining trust can mitigate the adverse effects of uncertainty. Promote collaboration and choice. Providing ways for students to exercise choice promotes a sense of control, which increases resilience in stressful times. Focus on structure and routine. This is crucial for those experiencing trauma. Set clear goals and explain how you will spend whatever time you have with your students and in whatever capacity. When students know what to expect, it increases their feelings of safety. Include yourself in your course design. In addition to helping students, adopting a trauma-informed pedagogical lens can help educators avoid compassion fatigue or secondary traumatic stress that comes with teaching during a community experience of trauma.
On a practical level, implementing universal design principles in the creative writing classroom includes small changes that can make a big difference in how a student experiences your class. There are many academic articles on universal design pedagogy out there, but the 2 most important lessons we've utilized in our classrooms have been, first, accessibility, creating multiple paths to the same information, at least 2, reminding students about due dates in multiple modes, oral, visual, textual, providing transcripts or captions for videos and writing alt text for images, recording audio feedback instead of or in addition to written feedback, and second, flexibility, accepting late work and giving extensions when requested, giving students the option to turn their cameras off during video meetings, planning at least one break during class time, and making attendance optional when possible and if applicable. Though these changes may seem simple or subtle, applying universal design principles is a powerful tool teachers can utilize to create more accessible classroom spaces for all students to succeed, whether in person or online. Another student-centered practice I often utilize in my classrooms is to involve students in the creation of a workshop model unique to the class and the semester in which the class is taking place. I've presented at the Creative Writing Studies Conference in the past about my 4 steps to implementing the student-centered workshop model. First, read. Introduce students to the traditional workshop model and who this system has historically excluded through assigned texts. Second, discuss students' own past workshop experiences, both good and bad, as well as some of the structural and immediate issues with the traditional workshop model. Third, collaborate. Draft a workshop model based on student surveys and in-class discussions. Fourth and finally, check in. If the model isn't working in some way, don't be afraid to reevaluate and make changes based on student feedback. The student-centered workshop model is a pedagogy I practice in all of my creative writing classes, but I found it particularly effective during the pandemic to provide students an avenue to enact positive change in a community they are a part of, and as a means of creating a more accessible, flexible classroom environment. My introduction to creative nonfiction class this past spring took place remotely through Blackboard and weekly Microsoft Teams meetings. In addition to implementing universal design and the student-centered workshop model, I also found the following practices highly effective in understanding what my students needed from me as their teacher. First, checking in regularly with students through dual-purpose writing exercises. During our Microsoft Teams class meetings, I asked students to take notes and complete group assignments in individual Word documents, which were submitted at the end of each class period. I would often ask check-in style free writing prompts that gave students an opportunity to share how they were feeling with me privately. This method gave me an idea how they were doing and whether they might need additional accommodations. Second, placing greater emphasis on restorative care practices during class time. Students were given at least one 5 to 7 minute break each class period and at least 2 during class periods that included writing workshops. At least 10 to 15 minutes of class time each period was devoted solely to silent reading, free writing, and thinking. And a few days during the semester, I dismissed students early and assigned them unstructured homework to use the extra time on something unrelated to school that they found restorative. Third, acknowledging the varying needs of individual students who may respond to crisis and trauma differently. While some students craved an outlet to talk about how the coronavirus pandemic was impacting their lives, others wanted our class to function as a distraction from the crisis. Our in-class conversations often needed to strike a balance between the two. I made information about campus mental health resources available to students in class time through email announcements and on our class Blackboard site.
Both fall 2020 and spring 2021, I taught a remote asynchronous intermediate composition course themed around what I called human nature writing and media. I integrated best asynchronous practices for online classrooms and a trauma-informed pedagogical approach when designing my curriculum, taking into consideration the way the pandemic amplified the standard challenges of asynchronous teaching. The high need for self-discipline and self-pacing skills, no live collaboration, lack of instant feedback, communication challenges, and disconnection. I found the following trauma-informed pedagogical practices most helpful. First, a focus on structure, routine, and consistency, thereby creating a safe and predictable environment. I used biweekly segments to establish a clear timeline for the course and a reliable pattern of when new segments were available and old segments closed. I organized these biweekly segments around due dates, my office hours, and when I sent announcements. Unless there was an urgent notice I needed to communicate, I only sent announcements during office hours, and I formatted these announcements the same each time. Next, a focus on maintaining ongoing communication and regular presence, something often lacking in asynchronous courses. Biweekly segments break down course content into bite-sized chunks. They also help disperse information evenly so concepts aren't crammed into announcements or long videos. Finally, they mimic a face-to-face course, which can trigger learning patterns students are accustomed to. My students reported these segments helped them with self-pacing, with organization of information, and with a feeling of connectivity with the class. The goal was to create a cyclic, dynamic feel to the course with announcements linking to discussion boards linking to the lessons and core concepts, and the lessons linking back to the assignments. The consistency and timing of this flow reminded my students of who I was and where I was during the semester, which gave students a sense of my presence as their instructor. Finally, a focus on choice and repetition. Material was presented to students in sequential order. This kind of framework is important to help students stay organized and on task. These segments could be read top-down or bottom-up, depending on how students chose to interact with the material. This design is intended to work the way memory does, associative, omnidirectional, since memory is one of the first things to suffer during trauma. My students liked that they could find the same information in many different ways.
As teachers, we know writing is a powerful tool for making sense and meaning of incomprehensible situations. Though the COVID-19 pandemic is beginning to wind down, with many campuses opening back up for the fall semester, there will invariably be future crises that wend their way into the writing classroom. Since our institutions are not always responsive to disaster, it's crucial that we, as writing instructors, are pedagogically prepared to navigate these events with our students in appropriate and compassionate ways. We hope these strategies will help you incorporate care as a core aspect of your creative writing class, and we invite you to share examples of care from your own classrooms in the Q&A session. Thank you.